The Young and the Restless Spoilers Shock. The truth had been building in silence for weeks, whispered suspicions, half-finished confessions, and uneasy glances exchanged in dimly lit hallways. But the moment finally came when Victoria Newman could no longer run from it. The paper in her trembling hands, a DNA result she wished she'd never seen, was proof that the child she thought was hers was never hers at all. Claire Grace Newman, the woman she had fought for, defended, and come to love as her own daughter, was the product of a cruel illusion, one engineered by Jordan, the very woman who had spent years destroying her family. And in the shadows of that scheme was another name, Cole Howard. Victoria had spent days refusing to believe it, telling herself that Jordan must have fabricated everything. But the evidence was irrefutable. The DNA report was official, sealed, and signed. It said clearly what her heart could not bear to accept: there was no biological link between her and Claire. And Cole's silence suddenly made sense. His guilt, his hesitation, the way he avoided her eyes whenever she spoke about Claire, it was all there, hidden beneath years of unspoken love and unhealed wounds. Cole hadn't conspired with Jordan willingly. He had been trapped, coerced into playing his part in a plan that spiraled far beyond his control. But knowing that didn't erase the betrayal. Victoria had loved him once, maybe still did, and that made it hurt all the more. He had chosen silence when the truth could have saved her. Now, the truth had arrived too late to save anyone. She went to Claire's room that evening with shaking hands and a breaking heart. She had rehearsed the conversation a dozen times in her mind, but every version ended in pain. When she opened the door, she didn't expect to find Holden Novak there. The sight of him, his presence beside Claire, sent a flicker of unease through her. There was always something unpredictable about Holden, something dangerous beneath his easy charm. Claire turned, startled by her mother's sudden entrance. "Mom," she said softly, unsure why Victoria looked so pale. Victoria didn't answer immediately. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The folder in her hand felt impossibly heavy. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Holden's gaze narrowed slightly. "Is this really the time?" he asked, his tone casual but edged with warning. Victoria ignored him. She looked at Claire, her expression caught between love and sorrow. "I need you to hear me out. And I need you to stay calm." She placed the folder on the table, unfolding the documents inside. There were two, one marked DNA results, the other last will and testament, Cole Howard. Claire stared at them, her confusion deepening. "What is this?" she asked, reaching for the papers. Victoria hesitated before answering. "It's the truth," she said finally. "The truth about who you are." The words came slowly, painfully, as Victoria explained everything. How Jordan had manipulated them, how she and Cole had both been deceived, how every moment of love and trust had been built on a foundation of lies. "You're not my daughter, Claire," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I wanted you to be, God, I wanted it more than anything. But you're not." Claire's face went white. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she shook her head violently, her voice rising in disbelief. "No. That's not true. You're lying." Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to Holden. "Tell her she's lying." But Holden said nothing. His jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. Victoria reached out, trying to comfort her, but Claire stepped back. "You're wrong," she cried. "Jordan said," she said, her voice broke completely. "She said you were my mother. That we were a family again." Victoria's own tears fell now. "Jordan lied," she whispered. "She used you. She used all of us." For a long, unbearable moment, the room was silent except for Claire's uneven breathing. Then something inside her seemed to snap. She turned away, clutching her head, trying to make sense of a world that suddenly felt unreal. Everything she thought she knew, her identity, her family, her purpose, had been ripped away in a single night. Holden watched her, his eyes flicking between the two women, calculating. He had known this day would come, he'd sensed it ever since Victoria began digging into Jordan's trail. But now that the truth was out, panic began to creep in. He had built his life around secrets, and this revelation, threatened to destroy everything. When Victoria turned back to the table to collect the papers, Holden's expression hardened. "That's enough," he said quietly. "You've said what you needed to say." Victoria froze, glancing over her shoulder. "This isn't about you," she said coldly. "This is between me and my daughter." "She's not your daughter," Holden snapped before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air like a curse. Claire's head jerked toward him, eyes wide with betrayal. "What did you just say?" she whispered. Victoria straightened, her gaze fierce now. "You knew," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Holden's silence was answer enough. And in that moment, something dark flickered across his face, a mixture of fear and resolve. He moved toward her, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled the room. "You should have left it alone, Victoria." Before anyone could react, Holden swung. The blow landed squarely against the side of Victoria's head, the sound sickening in its finality. She collapsed instantly, her body hitting the floor with a dull thud. For a second, time stopped. Claire's scream pierced the silence, raw and terrified. "Holden. What did you do?" Holden stood over Victoria's motionless body, breathing hard, his hands trembling. "I didn't mean," he started, but his voice broke. Then, as fear twisted into something colder, his expression changed. "We can't let her tell anyone," he said flatly. "If she goes to the police, if she tells Victor, we're finished." Claire stared at him in horror. "Are you insane?" she shouted. "We have to call for help." She dropped to her knees beside her mother, checking for a pulse. "She's still breathing," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "You hit her too hard." Holden grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Listen to me," he hissed. "If she wakes up, we're done. You think the Newmans will forgive you for this? You think they'll let you stay in that family after they find out the truth?" Claire shook her head, trembling. "I don't care. I won't let you kill her." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "We don't have a choice," he shouted. "She'll destroy us both. Don't you get it? The second she opens her mouth, it's over." Claire looked up at him, seeing for the first time the full extent of his darkness. The charm, the laughter, the passion, all of it was gone, replaced by desperation and cruelty. "You're not the man I thought you were," she whispered. Holden's voice softened, almost pleading. "I'm doing this for us," he said. "For you. Everything I've done, it's been to protect you." "Protect me?" Claire spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You just attacked my mother." He took a step toward her, his eyes wild. "If she tells Victor the truth, you'll lose everything. They'll turn on you like they always do. You'll be the enemy again, the outsider. I'm the only one who's ever been on your side." Claire backed away, shaking her head. "Not anymore," she said. In that moment, Holden realized he had lost her. Whatever connection they'd shared, the reckless passion, the shared secrets, it was gone. And as he stared down at Victoria, still unconscious, he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. The point of no return had been crossed. Claire fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling. "I'm calling 911, she said, her voice breaking. "You can do whatever you want, but I'm not letting her die." Holden hesitated, torn between running and stopping her. In the end, he did nothing. He just stood there, watching as Claire called for help, his face pale and unreadable. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the night. Paramedics rushed into the hotel, followed by security and police. Holden tried to disappear into the chaos, but Claire's voice stopped him cold. "If she dies," she said, her eyes blazing through tears, I'll make sure you never see the light of day again." Holden's expression flickered, pain, fear, regret, and then he was gone, slipping out the back before the officers could reach him. As Victoria was lifted onto the stretcher, Claire stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had lost everything in one night: her identity, her family, her lover, her trust. And in the harsh glow of the emergency lights, she finally understood the cost of living in a world built on lies. Because in the young and the restless, secrets don't just destroy relationships, they destroy souls. And for Claire Grace Newman, the woman who thought she had finally found a place in the world, this was only the beginning of her fall. The morning after the confrontation in Claire's hotel room felt like waking into a nightmare she couldn't escape. The sound of Victoria's body collapsing to the floor replayed in her head again and again, but when she had called for help, the paramedics had found nothing. The room was in chaos, the lamp shattered, blood on the edge of the table where she had struck her head, but Victoria herself was gone. There was no trace, no body, no note. Only absence. And absence, in Genoa City, always meant danger. Holden stood by the window, his face pale, his eyes darting between the city skyline and Claire, who was sitting on the floor clutching the DNA folder. "She was there, Holden," Claire whispered, her voice hollow. "I saw her fall. I called for help. Someone took her." Holden didn't respond right away. His mind was racing too fast, every thought darker than the last. "Then we need to think carefully," he said finally, his voice low. "If anyone finds out what happened here, you'll lose everything. The Newmans will destroy you." Claire looked up at him, tears glistening. "You think I care about the name Newman right now?" "My mother might be," she stopped herself, unable to finish. "You hit her, Holden. You did this. What if she's dead?" Holden flinched, but his expression hardened. "You don't know that," he said quickly. "She could have woken up and left. Maybe she doesn't want this to go public either." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but it was the only lifeline he could offer. Claire wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this wasn't as bad as it seemed. But the fear in her chest told her otherwise. Within hours, word spread that Victoria Newman had gone missing. The police were discreet at first, a wellness check, they called it, but by evening, every media outlet in Genoa City was running the same headline: "Victoria Newman disappears after confrontation at downtown hotel." Victor's name was on every reporter's lips, his fury already legendary. No one knew yet who had been the last to see her alive, but when security footage surfaced showing Claire and Holden leaving the building late that night, the whispers began. At Newman Enterprises, the air was thick with dread. Victor paced his office like a caged lion, his jaw set, his eyes burning with that quiet, terrifying anger only he could summon. "Find her," he told Nick and Adam, his voice low but absolute. "I don't care what it takes. I want answers." Nick exchanged a worried glance with his brother, both of them sensing that this wasn't just another family scandal. This was war. Meanwhile, in a small apartment miles away, Claire sat curled on the couch, staring at the same news alert flashing across her phone. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't breathed without guilt clawing at her throat. Holden tried to reassure her, but his words sounded hollow. "It's going to be okay," he said again and again, but the look in his eyes betrayed the truth: he was scared too. When Victor's investigators started knocking on doors, Holden began to panic. He wiped the hotel room clean, destroyed the security footage he could reach, and made calls to people no one in Claire's world should ever have known existed. "We're not going to prison for an accident," he said one night, pacing the floor while Claire sat motionless by the window. "You have no idea what your grandfather is capable of. If he finds out you were even near that room, you'll be finished." But Claire couldn't think about consequences. All she could see was Victoria's face, shocked, betrayed, then gone. Her heart twisted every time she thought of the things she'd shouted at her mother in anger. "You're not my daughter," Victoria had said, but the words no longer felt like rejection. They felt like prophecy. The days that followed were a blur of fear and suspicion. The police questioned Claire gently at first, treating her as a concerned relative. She told them what she could of the truth, but not all of it. She said her mother had been upset, that they'd argued, that Victoria had left the room before she did. She didn't mention Holden. Not yet. But Victor's investigators were far less forgiving. One of them showed up at her door with a thin smile and a folder full of photos. "We just need clarification," he said, though the tone implied accusation. The images showed Claire and Holden in the hotel lobby, arguing near the elevator, then leaving separately around midnight. "Funny thing," the investigator said. "No footage of Ms. Newman after she entered that room. Any idea why?" Claire's throat went dry. "No," she whispered. Across town, Cole Howard was crumbling under his own guilt. He had wanted to confess for months, to tell Victoria everything, how Jordan had forced him to cooperate, how he'd known that the DNA records were falsified but had kept quiet to protect Claire from Jordan's wrath. Now Victoria was gone, and his silence had become unbearable. He went to Victor himself, shaking as he spoke. "I tried to stop it," he said. "Jordan planned everything. She used me. Please believe me." Victor listened in chilling silence, his expression unreadable. When Cole finished, Victor stood slowly and looked him dead in the eye. "If my daughter doesn't come back alive," he said quietly, "you won't need to worry about Jordan. You'll need to worry about me." Back in Los Angeles, the tension between Holden and Claire finally cracked. "We have to go to the police," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Holden's reaction was immediate. "Are you out of your mind?" he snapped. "The moment you do, they'll pin this on us. You think Victor will let his family's name be dragged through the dirt? No. He'll make sure we're erased before that happens." Claire turned on him, her voice shaking with fury. "You think I care about the Newmans right now? My mother is missing, because of you." Holden's eyes narrowed, the desperation in them turning cold. "Because of me? You think she wouldn't have destroyed you? You were never her daughter, Claire. To her, you're a mistake she couldn't erase. I'm the only one who's ever seen you for who you are." Those words, meant to control her, instead set her free. Claire stepped back, realization washing over her. "You don't love me," she said. "You love the chaos. You love the danger. You used me to hide your own lies." Holden reached for her, but she pulled away. "If you ever come near me again, I'll tell Victor everything." That was the end of whatever bond had tied them together. Holden disappeared that night, taking with him every trace of his existence. His apartment was emptied, his phone disconnected, his accounts wiped clean. It was as if he had never been there at all. Days later, a call came to Newman Towers. The police had found a car abandoned near the edge of Lake Delaney. Inside, there were bloodstains matching Victoria's type, but no body. The news sent shockwaves through the family. Victor ordered round-the-clock patrols, private searches, and even hired a forensic team from Europe. "She's out there," he told Nick grimly. "Alive or dead, she's out there. And whoever did this will pay." For Claire, the nightmare only deepened. Every knock on her door, every phone call sent her heart racing. She lived in constant fear that the police would find new evidence linking her to that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Holden's face, calm, calculating, promising that he'd done it all for her. And every time she woke, she wondered if Victoria was still alive somewhere, or if her disappearance was a punishment Claire would carry forever. In the weeks that followed, whispers spread across Genoa City. Some said Victoria had run away, unable to bear the humiliation of the truth. Others claimed she'd been silenced to protect the Newman legacy. But the most haunting rumor of all was the one no one dared speak aloud, that she'd been betrayed by the very people she loved most. Victor's grief turned into obsession. He launched a personal investigation, his power and wealth bending the city's resources to his will. nothing, and no one would stand in his way. When the first report came in linking Holden Novak to falsified financial documents and Jordan's old network, Victor's wrath became unstoppable. "Find him," he said again. "And when you do, bring me Claire." Because for Victor Newman, love and vengeance were often the same thing. And as the search for Victoria intensified, Claire realized that the truth might destroy her long before anyone ever found her mother.